The first thing comes to mind when believers talk about church life is the weekly corporate worship service. Many regards the small group meeting to be less important, and it is something to engage in only if there is time to spare. The fact, however, is that corporate worship had coexisted with the small group meetings since the beginning of the church more than 2000 years ago. Both were held in the same regard. The importance of small groups lies not only in their unique functions. Small group life is basically a manifestation of the intrinsic quality and essence of the church. And why are small groups an integral components of church life? The Bible presents us with some important reasons. When Adam was created, God said, "It is not good for man to be alone." God then created Eve, and they gave birth to many. God's creations for community living, and no man is an island. As we know, God is love, and the Holy Father said, "This is my Son, whom I love," Matthew 3:17. And Jesus once said, "The world must learn that I love the Father and that I do exactly what my Father has commanded me." Jesus loved the Holy Father. As man is made in the image of God and has the inherent capacity to love, it is God's desire that man created in his own image will have a loving connections with others in the community. Just like the Holy Father loved his Son, Jesus, and vice versa. Since the fall of man, his ability to show love and concern for others has been tainted by sin and adversely affected. When God's work of redemption was accomplished on the cross, he gave to all who received his grace a new life and built with his love to become a new creation. Apostle Paul said, "God has poured out his love into our hearts by the Holy Spirit, whom he has given us." Romans 5:5. In addition, all who receive the new life also accept a new command from God. Jesus said, "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciple, if you love one another." John chapter 13. The church. The church is a community of believers who have been given a new life. It is also a community that has received the new command of the Lord. Small group living puts love into actions so that the church can become a community filled with love. This is taught in Ephesians as described. We, growing in every way more and more like Christ, who is the head of his body, the church. He makes the whole body fit together. The whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15 to 16. Small groups form an integral part of church life, and they are indispensable. Viewed from the perspective of God's character and his creations, as well as new creation, small group living is a manifestation of God's desire and his design. When God's people love each other, it is not just a natural growth and directions of the new creation. It is also God's order and his command. Why are small group an integral components of church? Or integral components of church life? The second reason is Small group living puts God's command into practice. Jesus teaches us in the Gospel of John. He said, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." John chapter 13. The focus of corporate worship is the interaction between God and His people. Believers may not find such weekly worship services with congregations of about 200 persons to be a time of the effective followings of God's command to love one another. In comparison, the platform provided by small group is more appropriate, as group members have more opportunities to update each other on their life circumstances and to show care and to show concern. They will be more willing to share their needs in a smaller, a warmer, and more familiar environment. In other words, small groups provide a platform for believers to put into practice their love for one another. In the process of putting love into practice, small groups bear witness to God. This is the third reason why our small group is an integral component of church life. Jesus said, "By this all men will know that you are my disciple, if you love one another." Believers bear witness to God's love through the way they live. And some of the results are seen in Acts chapter 2. As mentioned in chapter 2, all the believers were together and had everything in common. They gave to anyone as he had need. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their numbers daily those who were being saved. Acts chapter 2, 44 to 47. Small group life in the early church was not limited to looking after each other's materials and emotional needs. It also includes sharing the gospel, sharing the testimonies of God's work, as mentioned in Acts chapter 5. Day after day, in the temple, courts, and from house to house, they never stopped teaching and proclaiming the good news that Jesus is the Christ. Acts 5:42. On top of that, Apostle John said, "We proclaim to you what we have seen and heard, so that you also have fellowship with us." 1 John 1:3. In brief, small group can lead others to Christ through their love and testimonies, and are therefore an important link in carrying out the Great Commissions. The fourth reason is small groups are a place for believers to strive towards spiritual maturation. Believers are reminded in Hebrews chapter 1. It says, "Therefore, let us leave the elementary teachings about Christ and go on to maturity." Hebrews 1:3. It shows that the new life God gives is one that grows continually towards maturation. It is a life that matures gradually in truth and in behavior. Believers can get much help in knowing the true corporate worship. What large-scale worship service lack, however, it is the interaction, mutual encouragement, and accountability found in small group meetings, and the individual attention and prayer support given to believers according to their respective situations. This is one aspect of small group life that cannot be fulfilled through corporate worship services. One of the main reasons the Methodist Church was able to maintain a steady and sustained growth was John Wesley's small group organizations of believers. Small groups are an integral and indispensable part of church life. Small group living in church, it is not a recent phenomenon. There were signs of small group living in the account given in the books of Acts concerning the birth of church on Pentecost. God is love, and the church was the community He newly created. For members of this new community to love one another, it is not only an natural expression of the new life, it is also their responsibility and a lessons they are to learn. Small group in church display the loving character of God in the care and concern for each other and mutual support. They enable spiritual maturity in believers, witnessing for God, leading others to Jesus, and making disciples of them. Let us heed the reminders given in Hebrews. Let us not give out meetings together, as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another. Hebrews 10:25. In order to ensure that small group life is built on the right foundations and on the right track, we, SKMC, will restart the small group of the church